This video is brought to you by Slate Black Industries. For grips and accessories, visit slateblackindustries.com.
SSG 3000.
Let's do it, my dude. I am ready.
Once we shoot Magnum, we forget that there's this thing called windage. So I need to remember this. Brother.
Alright, I'm on at 100.
100. Which one?
I have it on the hidden target.
Alright, Mr. Peekaboo.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, get in the business. Woo! Wow. Accurate rifle. That's for
Yep.
sure. Okay, I'm on at 200. Right in the neck. You're not adjusting for
No, I'm
drop,
just aiming
right?
at the head. I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a 0.5 draw.
Got it. Nice. Okay, I'm on the lollipop at 300. Second from the left. Impact. Nice. Wow, dude. Okay, I am on at 4.
400.
Yes, sir. Dead center. Nice.
So, 130 plus year cartridge design. How many years before the 6.5 Creedmoor? 120 years before the 6.5 Creedmoor?
You Schweiz for already doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm on at 500.
500.
Just left of center.
Oh, maybe I don't have to give it.
Yeah, I mean, we are getting the win, but you're shooting a 6 mil, remember? Dead center, nice shot.
There is no wind. What wind?
Yeah, wind does not exist. All right, I am on at 6. Impact. That looked like it was upper chest. Perfect windage. That's better. That was an inch, maybe an inch low of center.
Okay.
That first shot, I couldn't tell if it was neck. All right, I am on at 7 hundo.
Oh, nice.
Impact on yours, Henry. Just an inch right of center.
I saw
Send
that.
another. Yeah, bud.
Nice. Yeah, I did not change it, so those two rounds that were stacked, those were from the same point of aim.
Okay, I'm at 800. Close wind flag's a lot more severe than the one downrange, so it's stronger here than it is downrange.
Dropping 6 mil. I'm just gonna hold edge to see where it goes. All right.
Confirm. Fire and ready. Impact. I think it was right at the neck line, dead on at the head. It barely flexed the target because I think you hit it right on.
Okay, so maybe I should give it less elevation.
Come off the elevation slightly. Just shift to a belly hold, same windage. Fire again.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wow, that was a dick shot.
It was.
That was where my elevation line was, too.
Okay, then maybe the first one just inched high just a touch. It's even better because it's somebody who watches the show, so they're gonna know.
Yeah, I know.
All right, I'm on at 9.
7.4 on 9.
Okay, windage is perfect
on
these.
the elevation, and then still keep it on the left edge. All right.
Yeah, windage is perfect on those 2 shots. Impact right of center, about 3 inches right, 3 inches low. You were on the left edge.
Yep.
I would come to the point where your stadia is just off the left edge.
Okay.
Impact,
nice.
upper chest, just right of center.
I see it. Nice.
All right, I'm on at a grand.
1,000.
Wind's a little bit even, a little bit firmer right now. And back down. Impact. Like dead on up at the upper chest line, barely flex the target, perfect windage. Come off the elevation just slightly and send another. Yeah, bud.
Nice.
Yeah, bud. Is that another perfect run?
That's another perfect
Dude,
run.
these 6
These
millimeters.
6.5s, man.
6 millimeters.
Frickin'
100-year-old
burn it.
cartridge.
So, as you guys know at this point, this is, oh my, 20 for 20. Euro Wonder. We're talking about a German-built rifle with chambered in a Swedish caliber. Very, very similar of an arrangement of the Swedish Mauser, by the way.
That's right. If you guys haven't seen that, Henry, you should overlay a little bit of footage here
Yeah.
of when you dropped 1,000-yard impacts with iron sights.
So some of these are actually used in like Norway, some like small provincial police departments that get 6.5 Swede essentially for free. They'll use these as sniper rifles. Like Norway, there's some guys, the 200 STR is what this thing is built off of, based off of, which was a rifle specifically designed to shoot 6.5 Swede. And so in some of those environments, some of those police departments may use something similar to this. But theirs would be closer to a 200 STR converted into a sniper rifle. But that said, I know you guys know it. We've done a perfect score, which means just one thing. It's a bonus round, baby.
All right.
All right. So, let's get into the bonus round, shall we?
Impact. Missed
Oh,
right.
no!
Impact. Miss right. Miss just low right.
Oh no.
It's tough.
2 out of 5, so a lot less acceptable than some of the other rifles we've shot. Partially that is me. The other part, my bipod wasn't really stiff on this.
I can see. Yeah.
I had a really hard time. After I cycled, I had to like really get back in, and I was psyching myself to really get back on target. So partially 1 and 2, but still a 20 for 20. Bonus round completed, so we have comparison with other stuff. Alright, so I was a little disappointed. With what happened last time on range. I felt a little pressured that we had to go along because we typically have a pretty tight filming schedule. So today I'd come back, I thought I'd test it to see. So I was a little disappointed the other day. I was kind of rushing through things because I knew we had a tight filming schedule. My bipod, I didn't use a pod lock system, so it was pretty wiggly. My fault for not identifying that, and also my fault for not giving it another go, although bonus rules is 1 go. So I want to show that the rifle is capable, so let's see. believe that was 4 out of 5. Still, I mean, it wasn't a perfect score, but still much better than the other day because I had a stable platform. So as I was editing this video, I think that one miss may have actually been a hit. Let me explain. If this were the target, a couple of different ways of seeing that it hit. First of all, you'll see a black mark on the target, although that's not always visible because of the distance. You'll also see the target move. And when you see the target move, you'll see the shadow underneath, kind of like what you see on my hand, changes its shape. The other thing you would have seen, if a projectile hit, as it hits the target, it fragments, and it goes downwards. And the downward fragmentation creates a line in the dirt. A temporary line, you'll see it splat, and then there's a line of dirt come out. Those are a few different ways of seeing that it's a hit. And the way we spot misses, if we see fragmentation or a projectile impact to the backside of it, typically that indicates that it is a miss. This one was a little bit different though. So you'll see the target moving from the previous hits. But then as it reached its apex backwards, and you could see that through the shadow, you'll see a dust clot that pops up on the top left side of the target. But one thing I also noticed, there was frag coming all on the base of it. When I was in the field, I only saw the dust clot and I thought, oh, that was a miss. But in reality, having that frag, that only presents itself if it hit the plate and fragmented the projectile towards the base. So what I actually think happened was as the target was swaying backwards from the previous impact, a bullet must have come down, and it is at a distance to where there would have been an extreme enough approach. As it came down, and as the target was arced backwards, I believe part of the projectile hit the top end of the target and fragmented into the dirt backwards. The back part of it must have hit the target and fragmented on the ground. Now, as they say in matches, if it breaks the line, it's a hit. So, if this did break the line, which I believe it did, I'm counting this as 5 out of 5, 5 hits out of 5 tries. Even though that broke the line. Let's get back to the video. I believe that was 4 out of 5. Still, I mean, it wasn't a perfect score, but still much better than the other day because I had a stable platform. So maybe this is a conversation, bipod versus a pack. Which one should you use when? But that's for a different video. Let's get back to the first video right now. Josh, I am exceedingly excited about this. So I'll just do a quick lowdown before we get into... I'll just do a quick lowdown before we get into the final piece. SSG 3000, in my opinion, a rifle that could be way more influential than it ended up being, in my opinion, was a failure to market into the sporting and police sniper arena. But switch barrel design from the 90s, so you could switch the barrel with just a twist of 3 Allen head screws on the inside, rechambered in 6.5x55. This is a rifle that is somewhat in between a long action and a short action. It's like an intermediate action that is optimum chambering for 6.5x55, the Swedish Mauser chambering. And so we dropped a bench rest 6.5x55 in it, and we have a McCann rail that allows me to use any clip-ons that I'd like in the future, and I'm using an AMG Vortex Razor HD. a very, very nice, I would say, 2015 era. I would say 2015 era, this would be pretty ideal of a off the beaten path sniper ensemble. But of course now we've progressed past. But imagine what this design could have done if they focused a little bit more on developing chassis systems for it. Something that could interface with AICS mags, because the system is a little longer, so you can actually chamber even up to 6.5 by 55 and 30-06 and stuff that you normally can't shoot in a short action. So there was a lot of potential in this. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I would blame SIG USA for misrepresenting what this is, because the customizability, the end user performance that you can get out of a course like this is phenomenal. Now, that said, Josh, I mean, I'm pretty excited about this. What do you say?
Yeah, let's go take it to the debrief and break it down.
We'll see you guys at the debrief.
Oh, hello there. I was just deeply consumed with the excellence in Swedish optimization of foreign weapon systems. Now, all of these weapons were actually purchased through 9-hole reviews. And with the support of Slate Black Industries and our small community of patrons of Patreon, we've been able to bring to you these interesting takes on different weapon systems. And it's this small group of distinguished ladies and gentlemen, mostly, that become the driving force of 9-hole reviews. Emotionally, financially, intellectually, we owe it all to you. And for those out there who are considering becoming patrons, I'd like to invite you to become one of us. But we're also very happy to just hear from you in the comments section as well. We'll see you around.
Welcome into the debrief, and Henry, does it feel good to be back on the precision rifle course, and what a run it was.
Indeed, I have the Scandinavian gods behind me, and the German forge to build my weapon of choice. Because indeed, I mean, this is one thing that we've talked about, that it seems like people of this shooting generation have never heard of this rifle, because that's right. I think that this is probably one of the best Euro sniper rifles that people out there have probably never heard of. And there's a lot of circumstances contributing to that. But of course, the green version of this is not the complete, let's say, OEM sniper that was offered from SIG Sauer. The green version has been slightly modified. Unfortunately, right now, I have a little bit of work being done to it, so there's a portion that's missing. It's not an SBR if there's no B in the equation, ladies and gentlemen. And this is what the rifle looks like now. Fitted for the AEM 530 suppressor. Pretty cool. You'll see me shooting here with no ear protection, because it is quiet enough to shoot with no ear protection, and that is pretty rad. This is a good segue to start on top of it. We could talk about the characteristics of the rifle at greater length when we talk about, of course, I bought another one, the military law enforcement version, because, of course, that is what chased Owen Wilson down in Behind Enemy Lines. But this one is the one that I think had so much potential, honestly, for current PRS applications and current, let's say, like, if you're not at the Accuracy International budget, but above Remington budget. So that in-between zone. There's a huge gray zone in between those two that custom rifles dominate. And I think this would have honestly just dominated that field if this were still offered. But it isn't.
Because when was this a thing, Henry? When did this rifle come to market? Like, in what era?
So this was a 1990s era bolt-action sniper rifle. But of course, it comes from a sporting lineage. Because usually it's the other way, right? Usually you have a military rifle that gets adopted for sporting use. But in the sniper world, a lot of times you can have sporting rifles that get adopted for sniper use, as opposed to, let's say, the AR-15, the Kalashnikovs, and some of the semi-autos that you see out there being adopted for sporting use. This particular rifle, the base design was actually, and we've mentioned this, actually our friend Carl mentioned it a bit in the AK-4D episode. Remember the Swedish sniper instructor we had on, Carl? He was in search of the 200 STR rifle for his own personal use. And the 200 STR is, of course, the 200 Scandinavian target rifle or Swedish target rifle, depending on which country you talk to. The Norwegians will refuse to say it's a Swedish target rifle. But that was developed for Stangskyting. I don't know if you've ever seen Stangskyting. It's a Norwegian style of sport shooting. So Stangskyting, a lot of people have seen it. They just don't know what it is. It's basically two shooters. It's a duel between the two shooters. Obviously, they're not shooting each other, but they have two sets of targets, right? You have
Thank God you clarified.
Well,
that,
they call it a duel. That's what they actually call it. You have two sets of targets, and one is at a closer range. Well, closer range of the larger target is at it's either 150 to 175. It's a range that they could set it into. And then they have in a V shape. So you have to traverse between the targets to hit the other one. The other one usually is a longer target, and it's typically a 250 meter target. And these are shot with iron sights. Typically, a lot of competitors use bolt action rifles. And the 200 STR was a specific rifle to target that style of shooting, pun intended. Cool. They wanted to make an action that could accommodate the 6.5 by 55 cartridge, a very lethal 100-plus-year-old cartridge.
The secret sauce in this build.
Indeed. And have a really slick bolt, something that could be used really, really fast because, of course, this style of shooting favors a really nice fast cycling bolt with, of course, zero jam, but also quick mag releases and quick mag changes on the bottom. And so Sauer of SIG Sauer, because, of course, SIG comprises of SIG, the Swiss company, and Sauer, the German company, into a third company that then branched off into America. SIG Sauer decided to militarize such a design into a sniper rifle. So what we've done here is actually reverse militarize it a little bit. So we've taken the 308 and sort of stepped it back to 6.5 by 55 in order to get to learn about the characteristics of the 6.5 by 55, which are, Josh.
There's a reason that 6mm in general is so popular nowadays, right? In terms of long-range shooting and the various PRS configurations. Clearly, people had it right long time ago. Long time ago.
So this is an interesting conversation. Right now, the 6.5 that is popular is a 6.5 Creed. For some reason, a lot of people hate on the 6.5 Creed. I get it. It's not the yield 30-06, and it's definitely not, the 308 that we all love and cherish. But 6.5 Creedmoor is a very respectable cartridge to shoot long distances. It takes a lot of the variables out of it. But really, 6.5 Creedmoor is taking a 6.5 cartridge and chambering it into a cartridge length that fits into 308 short action systems. So it may actually not, there are certain aspects that are not optimum to it. Partially is you've shrunken down the case volume and you're still pushing it to go as fast as a 6.5 by 55, which by virtue 6.5 by 55 is a little longer. And by doing that, you actually raise the chamber pressure and you actually degrade your barrels a lot faster by doing that. So that's always been a downside to shooting 6.5 Creedmoor is, one of the things that a lot of 6.5 Creedmoor shooters tend to go after are systems that you could switch barrels. Not saying just that, you save on gunsmithies or whatever, but really having the flexibility of being able to throw a fresh barrel in when you need to is kind of nice. So, with all that, going back to the sporting rifle aspect of the SSG 3000, which is a militarized 200 STR, these come factory. These and the 200 STRs have user-serviceable barrels. So it's a 3 Allen screws on the bottom, and it's not the 3 Allen screw clamps, but it's in a really interesting configuration to where once you relieve the action from the chassis, you can access those 3 Allen screws and just pull the barrel out and drop a new one in as you need. And on top of that, the barrels actually use a barrel extension or receiver extension on the end of the barrel, like an AR-15. So you could headspace barrels not to the rifle, but from the factory, to headspace them to a standard bolt head. Mm-hmm. So for gunsmiths to make barrels, they just need the receiver extension, and then they could buzz the tenon, stick the bolt in, make sure that it chambers correctly, and that's headspaced. And so it is a completely user-serviceable platform for a sports shooter to switch out barrels as much as they need for a high-volume shooting event like Stangskyting, with an amazing trigger pull, flat-face bow triggers in the 90s. I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit of a jump cut here because I do need to clarify some stuff. This isn't a true chassis. Maybe you could call it a proto-chassis. Certainly it has elements of a chassis. Let me explain. If you take this out of the stock, you'll see that the receiver and the bottom portion is actually milled out of the same block of steel. The magwell right here, this is how the magazine release works. This is it. And the receiver or the stock interfaces with this lower portion, the proto chassis, or maybe you could call it the like a lower chassis like extension. I don't know what you would call it. It's the bottom part of the receiver that functions like a chassis. Now, again, these were from the 1990s, this design. And it's sort of I'm later on going to say that it predates the L96. It does predate the L96, but I was just thinking that the PSG 90, which is the pre-L96, the pre-Arctic Warfare, pre-AWs, were made in the 90s. But they had roots from 86. That's when the first PM, Precision Marksman, was around. And these are true chassis rifles. Now, what is a chassis rifle? Now, technically, the receiver and the bottom portion right here under the stock, you can see a line right here. That portion is the chassis, and it is separated. So it's not one piece. However, Arctic warfares are bonded between the receiver and the chassis. So it's separate and then put back together. So I don't know what you would say about that. Now, the chassis itself is incredibly strong because it spans from the front all the way to the rear. And then the skins, and this is just a polymer piece that goes on top to give it the contour, then bolts onto the chassis. The chassis really is just a piece of L-shaped aluminium that runs from the front to the back. Now, obviously, this doesn't have the full chassis from the front to the back, but it certainly has elements of it to where it has your magwell underneath, and it has the cassette, the trigger cassette mounting block portion. But it doesn't have a full block that goes all the way to the front and the back because it uses a traditional stock instead of skins. This is closer to how the Sako version is, where the Sako stock doesn't extend past, and that's why with the Sako TRG systems, you can switch the stock between a fixed stock and a folding stock. But the Sako TRG still has the front bottom portion of the chassis. And of course, the magwell is integrated into the chassis as well. So maybe calling this a chassis isn't most apt. Maybe more so it's a proto-chassis, a pre-chassis, has elements of the chassis right here. Oh, and this is how the barrel removes. So this is the barrel interface right here. So anyways, Thought I wanted to clarify that. We'll jump back into the discussion.
One thing that I would say here is I'm not super versed, Henry, on what precision rifle setups were available in the 90s, but you had what were the big ones? What would have been the go-to setups? Accuracy International, right?
That was still in its infancy. Remember,
in the 90s, right? Okay.
The Green Meanie still hadn't fully existed yet.
So this was still before they had actually gotten like the major contracts.
Correct.
To push it forward.
This was 1990, and the Green Meanie is the L96.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So what rifles fall in the same bucket then?
Not the Remington 700, because the Remington 700 is a traditional receiver in the stock action.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at the competition in the time period, this rifle seems to me to be so far and away ahead of all of the competition that it has, maybe by today's standards, the feature set that it has may be slightly dated or commonplace, but it was certainly not commonplace, again, from my understanding, in the 90s or in the early 90s at the, to say the least.
No, this particular rifle design was so far ahead of its time that I don't think they had an application for it yet. PRS hadn't existed. The new style of shooting hadn't existed. People didn't care about accessories on sniper rifles. All they cared about was a bipod attachment and sling attachment points. And the way the scope
so you think like this was almost like it was too ahead of its time, or what are they, as they say, too ahead of its time or whatever.
It's a Tony Stark quote from his dad,
I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll figure this out, and when you do, you will change the world.
But that's the problem. That's a good segue, because that's the problem that we run into for this particular rifle, right? It came into the possession or the marketing responsibility in the U.S. came under SIG Sauer USA. Frankly, SIG Sauer USA massively mishandled this particular project. They marketed the SSG 3000 to compete with the Remington 700. So if you're talking about a population that just wants a hunting rifle, this is far too expensive. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, so they sold these in 308. But these magazines can accommodate up to a by 55. And actually, you could chamber this in 30-06 and switch the barrel out by just twisting Allen keys, 3 of them. And yet, they didn't offer any other barrel. Can you imagine if you offered a 30-06 barrel with this? All of a sudden, compared to other snipers who only had 308, you could juice up 30-06s and shoot it at longer distances. Yeah. But that was never offered. And on top of that, this could be developed to run on chassis. Imagine if someone developed a chassis to run on the later AICS system. Like, if the 2000s rolled by, right? And someone designed a chassis that could run on AICS magazines. Or have a swappable magwell to do either SSG-style mags, or the AW mags, or the AICS mags. It's just unfortunate. Like, you look at this, and nowadays, these are discontinued. They're no longer being made. But they missed the boat by being way too innovative for their era. And there was no application.
And then not really knowing how to market it in that era, it sounds like, or coming out of that era into the a time period where, like you say, this is not something that gets put up against like a basic Remington 700, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and that's the thing. That's the problem. We'll go into more of this when we talk about the militarized, the law enforcement sniper SSG 3000. But these things were very much considered sort of like the AW or TRG 22s we have at home. Like, if your agency couldn't afford it, then maybe look at what the SSG 3000 is. That's a sad fate of it. And then even worse, like, you see these have really nice Macmillan stocks. These are the early imports from Germany. It still used the old school top rail, the dovetail, and I used a spur mount on top of this particular one. Later on, they actually integrated a pick rail mount on top of it. SIG Sauer, that is, SIG Sauer USA. They integrated a pick rail on top of it, and then they used a cheapened stock for the efforts of decreasing the cost of the rifle to make it more competitive. The problem is,
right.
that's a cheapened stock. So there's two ways of doing this, right? It's actually a viable method if you have an upgradable chassis that has pick rails and interface all over it that you could then purchase down the road and swap the stock out. So essentially, either you sell the barreled action, one with a cheap stock, or a chassis that you could swap over. Kind of like what the Delta 5 from Daniel Defense, like their model is. You could have that flexibility of going, you just want the good action and a stock that is good enough. You could do that. This is a Macmillan stock. It's obviously neither of those. So the sad thing is you'll see a lot of the fate of the SSG 3000 at least in America from a civilian aspect. Sports shooting, PRS aspect, it doesn't exist. It ended up in like the 2010s, they discontinued it in America. And the liquidated stock, you could find them on Walmart shelves for $9.99. And that's a sad fate of this, is that you had one of the most forward-leaning, advanced designs that the Germans, marketing it towards the Swedish sports shooting system, had developed. User-serviceable barrel, chassis system, detachable magazines, really slick action, and the top rail is pretty standard. You could put whatever optic you want onto it, obviously. You had limited aftermarket development, like you see on mine has a McCann rail to put like clip-ons as you want. But really, outside of a Norwegian company called Vision Chassis Systems, nobody else developed it. SIG Sauer never made replacement barrels for people. Like, can you imagine if you could chamber this in 30-06, 270? I'm thinking in like 2010s, so like think that era. 30-06, 270, like these cartridges, you could juice them up to not shoot out of old rifles, but shoot out of these rifles and achieve like a mini Magnum status with the efficiency. Or you could chamber it in 6.5 by 55 that could achieve the 6.5 Creed velocities, which with much lower bore erosion because of the chamber pressure being far lower. Or you could have developed a chassis to work with any type of future development. But none of these things were really on the radar of them, and it was being marketed to the cheapest of the cheap because they were competing not with the AIs, but they were trying to compete with the Remington 700.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. It is a sad fate.
It sucks because of how freaking good these rifles actually are.
Yeah.
So let's, in the last moments here, Henry, let's just pivot toward the actual run itself. Watching this back, I didn't love all of my spotting calls on it. I think I actually probably miscalled one or two shots out on this course. But the rifle, and you bailed me out on some of these because of how dang accurate it was. It was so accurate that we were able to sort of get away with, let's favor this portion of the plate. And even though my call might not have been the best place to be aiming, you were still able to put it on a much smaller, reduced size portion of a plate. And
that's a really good segue back to the importance of having just like, we talk about this all the time. Like, just because it has a looser MOA tolerance, like a less precise rifle, doesn't mean you cannot hit farther targets. But if you have a more precise rifle, like these things, or like the AIs or TRGs on that we have, man, it is so much more forgiving. And sometimes in the field, when you face elements of unknown, you face conditions of the unknown, weird like stances that you're shooting in, that precision actually may save you from missing the target in the long run, just because of the precision that it's able to, push out to cover the issues that you may be having on hand. But on top of that, like, the recoil is very manageable. Obviously, this is a heavier system than the normal 200 STR, so even more manageable. The bolt throw is incredibly slick. Single stack magazines have next to zero issues with, like, jams or anything. I would say, even if you look at, we've already got another episode that we did on the countdown for this particular rifle. You could even see it stretch itself into different odd positions, and shooting smaller targets. And then I would say the one thing that I was dissatisfied with this, and why I went back to reshoot the bonus portion, was because basically as soon as I got it like barely ready to run, I was excited to run this on the course, and I put the bipod on there without the little lock bars, and I was unable to lock the bipod, so it was actually bouncing. It is swiveling left and right quite a bit. And I was just cowboying it with you that day. I was just saying, yeah, let's just roll with it. But honestly, I felt bad. I felt like I was selling the rifle short, so I went back and sandbagged it to actually shoot it how stable I would want it to shoot. And you could see, once I corrected the shooter deficiencies, the rifle's able to perform.
Yeah, pretty cool too to see it be able to do that. I think that part of it too comes down to, this is interesting too, because you almost never shoot off of bipods, and you almost always shoot off of like your pack, like slinging your pack down, shoot off your pack. And so, hey, it's cool that you were able to do it and clear the course off of the bipod. But also interesting to see that when we really tried to push it, how ultimately, all things considered, like, I get what you're saying, where like maybe it wasn't optimally configured, but you still go back to the way that you were most comfortable. I think that stuff is interesting, because I think it's true that you revert back to the thing that you're most comfortable with when it really matters, right?
Well, I would also say once I was able to lock the bipods down, and I've gone back and shot it quite a bit. With it locked down, it is a huge difference when you don't have that swivel flopping around. It wasn't an issue when I was shooting on slow fire with the actual course, but once it actually mattered, I actually had to like jam it down with it banking like that. I'm not used to that with my Atlas bipods, because I put a lot of tension on my Atlas bipods. My TRG bipods, I also modify it to where it doesn't flop, because factory wise those come floppy. So I don't like that flop personally.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm getting at. Yeah. So within context here, like, if you're somebody who's watching this episode and you've gotten to this part of the discussion, you guys are certainly some of the OGs, right? You're sticking around for the long form, end of the long form discussion. Be very sure that you're taking your gear, whatever the gear is, and actually putting it through at what we would call like match speed, right? Match cadence, or like actual true training cadence, where it's not just like, oh yeah, well, it's zeroed, things feel good. It's like, no, you're actually really pushing yourself in that capacity, because that is where you will identify where stuff doesn't work the way you want it to work, and give you an area to focus on. So, and Henry, any closing thoughts here?
Yes. So the reason this thing has the barrel off right now is because the barrel is being worked on by Allen Engineering. I am getting it outfitted for my AEM 530 in the front. So when it does come back, whenever it does come back, I'm sure we can do a little bit more testing with it, because I think furthermore, this is one of those few rifles that is a little bit more flexible with the cartridge type, because it's no longer bound by the short action magazine. And so potentially we could turn this into like a test mule for a bunch of different cartridges, as long as we can get them chambered in it. So very cool. There's more of this coming back. I really hope more people learn about these, but they're just not on the market these days. They're discontinued. They're hard to find, especially in this Macmillan stock. It's a sad story for me. It's amazing seeing the ingenuity put into it, but it's a sad story for me to see And I think that a lot of that comes down to shooter education. It comes down to marketing from the manufacturer side, and quite frankly, developing some of these sports events to get the most out of these rifles, like you were talking about, at match speed, rather than just sitting on the bench, lazily shooting at the targets.
Yep. So, ladies and gents, there you go. Henry, I think we ought to drop the countdown link into the pinned comment. If you guys haven't seen that episode, it's a new series we've rolled out here where Henry and I work in the sort of a shooter-spotter type of scenario, but with a limited time target engagement or target of opportunity style engagement. A lot of fun, bunch of different scenarios we have set up there, and we shoot this rifle. So, with that said, do all the good YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Check us out over on Patreon. Hop into the private Discord. And until next time, we'll see you on the range.
This is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Red Con 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over.